I was first diagnosed with dementia 10 years ago next month. So been at this a little while already. The first diagnosing doctor thought I had FTD because the scans showed the damage started in my frontal lobe, which explained my early symptoms, which had to do with executive function, like multitasking and time management, things like that. When I didn't progress the way I was led to believe, about 18 months after that, I went through diagnosis again at the Mayo Clinic in the United States with their chair of behavioral neurology department. He told me that it was medically undeniable that I had dementia. He just couldn't tell me what type because my scans were so atypical of anything he ever sees. He did say he was fairly certain from the family histories that he believed I had the same type of dementia that my father was at that time in very late stage with. My father passed away the following year in 2010, and we know from a research autopsy that was performed on his brain that he did have Alzheimer's disease. So the current opinion of my local neurologist is that I most likely have atypical Alzheimer's, more specifically a frontal variant Alzheimer's, which is one of the actual types within the Alzheimer diagnostic possibilities. And it starts in the frontal lobe and then later looks a little more like typical Alzheimer's. Fortunately, it's like with the way it was with my father, it's slow progressing. So the name of my presentation, The Power Behind It, Nothing About Us Without Us. This motto, nothing about us without us, we think was first used by other sectors of more traditional segments of the disability sector. So we didn't invent it, but we certainly picked it up and proudly carry it to reinforce that people with dementia should be involved in anything that concerns us, whether it's our care, whether it's public policy, whether it's, anything that involves us should really involve people living with the disease as well. So that phrase describes that very quickly. Next, please. Personally, I started my advocacy through the U.S. nonprofit, the Alzheimer's Association, at the state level, working on a committee to coordinate among state chapters on public policy and lobbying with our state legislature about laws for the benefit of people with dementia, and then ended up also lobbying at the federal level with elected members of the U.S. Congress from my state of Iowa. I've been connecting with other people who live with a dementia diagnosis for a lot of years now, and so both in person and online, that number of people has built over the years, and really started to be more and more of my focus as time went on. So then in 2013, a group of 8 of us, all living with a dementia diagnosis, started getting together by video conference software on the internet and talking about what we could do to help, improve quality of life for everybody that lives with dementia, how we could start an organization that focuses solely on what our priorities are and not what anybody else's were. And so then formally in January of 2014, Dementia Alliance International was born, and I was one of those 8 founding members of the organization. Currently, there's just 2 founding members left involved in running the organization, which are myself and Kate Swaffer, who's the current chair of the organization. We're also in a strategic partnership with ADI, Alzheimer's Disease International, which has been a wonderful thing for our organization. These are the myths of dementia, and these are just some of the things that go towards reinforcing the stigmas, like there's no point in diagnosing as nothing can be done. We know that's not true. Even though there's not treatments that affect the disease course, for some people there's treatments that help with symptoms. There's many other things as far as things that can improve quality of life. So diagnosis is important. Another myth, dementia is normal part of aging. We know it's not normal. There's nothing normal about it. We are fading away or not all there. That's something anybody living with the diagnosis really cringes at. We can't communicate with you. Well, I have dementia, I'm communicating with you. That's not true. We don't have memory loss, therefore we can't have dementia. Well, I'm living proof of that. I had no memory issues when I was first diagnosed, and now only have minor memory issues so far. We don't feel pain. That's just silly. If you eat this or do that, you will prevent dementia or be cured of dementia. We know that's not the case. We can still speak and function in public, therefore we couldn't possibly have dementia. That's not true. And also that we cannot possibly live positively with dementia. Well, those of us involved with DAI are proven that we can live positively with a diagnosis of dementia. And this great quote from Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Root causes of stigma, and perhaps the biggest one is lack of knowledge about dementia. That's really at the root of prejudice and stigma. There's many vague fears and many myths about dementia. 2 wrong assumptions: people with dementia are not all there, and they will have challenging behaviors. All of us at DAI feel like both of those are wrong, and there's only a certain few that have what people look at as challenging behaviors. Many times, a lot of us feel like some of those are because someone doesn't like something about their current situation, but they don't have the ability to communicate what that is anymore, so it comes out in a behavior. I think to me, that's just logical. Ignorance passes on stigmas and assumptions to the next generation, so we want to break that from being passed generation to generation. Ignorance also causes the discrimination against people with dementia. Dementia Friendly Communities, or DFCs. Now, those are more than just raising awareness about dementia and about being friendly. It's also about including us and about our basic human rights. Just because we have dementia doesn't mean we lose our human rights. What is a DFC? Okay, this is just one definition, but a dementia-friendly community is a place where people living with dementia are supported to live a high quality of life with meaning, purpose, and value, and where they are included in every conversation about them. Being a dementia-friendly community is also about being treated under the guidelines of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and within the Disability Discrimination Acts around the world. It's not just about being friendly and raising awareness of dementia, it must also be about human rights and disability support. DFCs are about human rights, disability rights, equal access to our community, equal inclusion, autonomy and equity, and dementia-enabling environments. This will mean equal access to our community, to health care, to a diagnosis, and to non-discrimination, reducing stigma, and also to dementia-enabling environments in the same way that we provide wheelchair ramps and other devices that help facilitate other disabled people. Key steps to a DFC: establish a local dementia advisory working group of people with dementia, establish a local Dementia Alliance or working group that will work together with people with dementia, support local organizations and businesses to become dementia friendly through making small changes that will have large impacts on the lives of people with dementia, raise awareness of dementia, working with organizations to promote volunteering, employment, and other meaningful engagement opportunities for people with dementia. These steps are all part of the process used by the Kiama Dementia Friendly Community Initiative in Australia, which is the only one to this point in the world to have been recognized by the WHO, the World Health Organization. Why human rights? The WHO and the ADI had been writing and talking about human rights for people with dementia for some time, and in 2012 wrote a co-authored report, Dementia, a Public Health Priority. In it, they wrote, "It is widely recognized that people living with dementia are frequently denied their human rights, both in the community and in care homes. In many countries, people living with dementia are often physically and chemically restrained, even when regulations are in place to uphold their rights. Furthermore, people living with dementia can also be victims of abuse. For example, they may be beaten for being stubborn or exhibiting challenging behavior. Third parties may also use a diagnosis of dementia to their own benefit, such as using deceit to acquire a person's assets. This reflects the ethical challenges inherent in the support and protection of people living with dementia, and legislation alone will not be sufficient to ensure the protection of their rights." The 1948 UN Convention was meant to protect every single member of civil society in the world, including people diagnosed with any type of a dementia and who have disabilities caused by the symptoms of their dementia. 67 years later, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, report addressing dementia, the OECD response concluded, dementia receives the worst care in the developed world. Now, most of DAI's members are from developed countries and have anecdotal evidence. This is true. Many of us receive little or no care after diagnosis, and even receiving a diagnosis can be extremely difficult. Health care is a human rights issue, as is our support for our disabilities. The 2015 OECD report also confirmed why it was necessary to demand a human rights-based approach to dementia, which includes full access to the CRPD and rehabilitation. So if we manage some of the symptoms of dementia as disability, especially when a person is diagnosed in the earlier stages of the disease, they are more likely to be able to maintain independence for much longer. Again, evidence is now emerging that this is in fact true. 2015, demand for a human rights approach to dementia globally. In March 2015, DAI's current chair, Kate Swaffer, my friend, colleague, and fellow co-founder, was invited to give a keynote presentation at the WHO First Ministerial Conference on Dementia, where she made 3 demands on behalf of the 47.45 million people estimated at that time to be living with dementia. Since then, with encouragement from the whole dementia sector, the WHO worked in record time to prepare a draft paper with consultation from all key stakeholders, including Dementia Alliance International, on a global action plan, a public health response to dementia. 2017, the WHO adopts Global Action Plan. This resulted in the unanimous adoption at the World Health Assembly on May 29, 2017 in Geneva, where delegates at the World Health Assembly today endorsed a Global Action Plan on the public health response to dementia, 2017 to 2025, and committed to developing ambitious national strategies and implementation plans. Dementia Alliance International was represented there by Kate Swaffer and Professor Peter Mittler, also a DAI member and our human rights advisor, who have both contributed to the impact and raising the voices of people with dementia in the human rights and disability rights space. The global plan aims to improve the lives of people with dementia, their families, and the people who care for them, while decreasing the impact of dementia on communities and countries. Areas for action include reducing the risk of dementia, diagnosis, treatment, and care, research and innovative technologies, and development of supportive environments for carer partners. People with dementia are also becoming increasingly committed to ensure their countries act on this. Human rights in the CRPD. In real terms, what this action plan means may be different in individual countries. For example, in a country like India, where only 10% of the people receive a diagnosis, it may need to start with timely diagnosis and awareness raising. In the rich, developed countries, it must mean rehabilitation and disability support, with full access to the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Unfortunately, in my country, the US, while President Obama did sign the treaty, our Congress refused to ratify it. But we do have the Americans with Disabilities Act, which does offer a large number of protections that in some cases go much further than the CRPD. So we do have a great deal of protections under that law. Now, treat the symptoms of dementia as disabilities. That's what we're talking about here. And there is a new communication access symbol, Scope 2016, showing in the middle there. We also need a uniform symbol for invisible disabilities. In the same way people are supported with wheelchair access, people with dementia need support for their visible and invisible disabilities. That is a basic human right. Why the medical model of care is no longer appropriate. In the 1970s, diagnosis was usually later in the disease process, therefore late-stage dementia treatment and management was appropriate. Since the 2000s, diagnosis is occurring much earlier in the disease process in many, many cases, but health and care professionals are still applying later stage disease management. Recommendations: timely diagnosis, human rights-based approach to dementia care, including proactive proactive rehabilitation and disability support to improve resilience, hope, quality of life, and independence for longer, better support for families, and when required, palliative care, balanced research, risk reduction, care, and disease-modifying drugs, and a cure. Education, education, education. The education is what's going to reduce the stigmas. It's going to allow people to live better with a diagnosis, make it better for carers, everybody. This is a quote from me in 2013. I didn't think it was that big a deal when I said it, but my colleague Kate Swaffer is always bringing this back up. So, we are just changing in ways the rest of you aren't. We have increasing disabilities, and the sooner it is looked at that way, instead of stigmas, misunderstandings, and complete lies, the better for all of us living with dementia. We desperately need others to enable us, not further disable us. Dementia Alliance International, what we do at our organization, besides all of the advocating we do, is that the membership is exclusive to people with any kind of dementia diagnosis. We do weekly online peer-to-peer support groups that use video conferencing so we can see and talk to each other at these support groups. We do 24/7 chat rooms. We have a post-type support group, monthly online cafes, monthly educational webinars, master classes, and there's our web address up there. Also, we have some translated brochures that are out front if anybody wants one of those. And one final quote: there is a systemic and gross underestimation, of the capacity of people with dementia, even in the later stages of the disease. And this is by my colleague, Kate Swaffer, and we just find that to be true everywhere. And finally, thank you very much for your attention and your kindness. There is my email address, the general email address for our organization, my Twitter handle, followed by the organization Twitter handle, and then our Facebook and LinkedIn account for the organization. Anybody has any questions for me, please find me. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you so much.